no
My
worries.
bedroom is the best place for podcasts because it's like the quietest and the most like insulated, but it's also the most boring to look at.
Well,
I
when
should
you
really
start
put
to
something
come back.
behind me.
Okay, here we go. All right. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Trust Your Gut podcast. I am your host, Hannah Ruhamah, queen of all things kombucha. And I'm so excited to have a really great guest here with us today, Emma Christiansen. So I will let you introduce yourself. But first, I will start off and say she has just released this beautiful new book all about hard seltzer, iced tea, kombucha, and cider. So if you have a penchant for making alcoholic beverages, this is going to be a wonderful book for you, especially if you love hard kombucha. Well, welcome, Emma. Tell us a little bit about your background. How and why do you love kombucha?
Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me. I'm super excited to chat about all things kombucha, hard, soft, otherwise, all the things kombucha today. My name is Emma, as you literally just said. I have written 4 books, actually. This hard seltzer, iced tea, kombucha, and cider book is just the most recent endeavor that I have put out into the world. I am also most recently the manager for simplyrecipes.com. And right now I'm just kind of like swimming in the waters and seeing what new projects come up and brewing a lot of kombucha. So yeah, that's what I'm up to.
That's great. Well, you mentioned you have a couple other books. Are they also about kombucha and fermentation?
The first one covers a whole gamut of things. The first one is called True Brews, and it covers how to make homemade sodas at home, just like sparkling juices and sodas and things like that. Kombucha, of course, kefir, both water kefir and milk kefir, and then wine, mead, and beer, and sake. Boy, that book really, I published that one like 10 years ago, and that one really, really covered the gamut. And then I did one on beer, and then I did one on cider.
That's great. Well, what got you, how did you get bit by the fermentation bug?
I mean, how do you not get bit by the fermentation bug? It's just I think actually the thing that really got me hooked first was beer, because beer at the time, this was like 2010 or so, and it was just the beginning, the dawn of the craft beer revolution. And in my head, I'm like, that's just something you buy at the store. And then I was at a friend's house and they were like, oh, we're doing a brew day. Why don't you come on over? And they had brewed a batch of beer. And I was just like, like I had no idea that you could actually make this kind of stuff at home. And then that was, from there I got into kombucha, I got into cider, I got into all the other things. And just the like creativity balanced with the science of making these things yourself, plus all the like the flavors that you can do by like that you can't buy at the store, the techniques you can do. Yeah, it just, I could go on for a while.
Yeah, well, it sounds like you have a real passion for fermentation. So, well, let's ask this. Do you remember your first sip of kombucha?
I'm trying to remember. It was probably around that time, because I think it was like 2010 that like GT started coming on the market, and then after that it was like all the other things. If I'm remembering my own timeline correctly, I cannot remember where I was. I'm sure somebody was like, "Here, I'm gonna try this. You'd like it," and I do remember that first sip, and I was just blown away by the flavors. Like, I'm not a sweet person. I am very sweet, but in terms of my tastes, I tend to go more sour, tangy. Like that is what really appeals to me. And so trying this thing that was so different from the sodas that I'd had at the store and anything else that I'd ever drunk before, it just like really opened my mind and my eyes and my palate and all that stuff.
So you didn't have the sort of first time user kombucha phase?
Not at all. And I remember it being, because like I feel like a lot of the kombuchas that have come out like since GTs, they often tend to go toward the sweeter, softer, like a little more mild side of things. But I'm like, nah, give me that punch. Like I want to get punched in the face by this kombucha. That's what I love. So yeah, no, it was love at first sight with kombucha.
Oh, good. I'm that sour girl too. I like tangy. I like refreshing. And now that face is what I do whenever I have something that's too sweet.
I know, right?
It's like what happens when you fall in love with fermentation, because those flavors are so associated in our biology, our physiology, with digestion, with health. For me, it was really hardwired. But you seem to have a passion for hard beverages, hence the book. Hard seltzer, iced tea, kombucha, and cider. And these are all really popular drinks right now on store shelves. So this is a peek behind being able to make these at home yourself. So how easy or hard would you say this is? If you're like a total newbie, you've never fermented anything, would you make something out of this book, or would you recommend?
Absolutely.
Okay.
No, absolutely. Start with the seltzers. Making a hard seltzer is the easiest thing. When I first started thinking about this book and I was working with 10 Speed, my publisher, on it, I was kind of like, gosh, can you even make hard seltzer at home? Like, I don't know. I've never really thought about it. But really all you do is make boozy water, and then you add fruit or juice or whatever flavorings you want to it. And making boozy water, it's like the fermentation process, as you know, and as your listeners probably know, is really just sugar, liquid, medium, and yeast. And the yeast eats the sugar and makes alcohol as a byproduct, in this case at least. and so basically you're just making a sugar water, adding some yeast to it. The yeast eats the sugar. You get boozy water, which, hey, if that's your jam, you can have some boozy water. And then, just add any fruit juice or like whole fruit to anything you want to flavor it. Really, you can even go into herbs and spices and that whole gamut you can run down. So seltzer is the easiest. I will admit that hard kombucha is probably the hardest of them. Although, like your followers and everyone listening here, if you already make kombucha, you've got half the game already, because you kind of know what you're expecting from kombucha. You're in the habit of making it. I think that if you had never made kombucha before, that is not the one that I would start with. But if you're already in the habit of making kombucha, it's not that big of a leap to make it hard.
Yeah. Well, so what types of yeast are you using? I'm assuming these are commercial yeasts you're purchasing from. I mean, you can even get them on Amazon, I think.
Yeah, for sure. So for hard kombucha, you make an initial batch of just regular kombucha, and then you remove the SCOBY. And so you've got this, lovely, gorgeous kombucha that you've made. And then you add a little bit of additional sugar to that. I usually use corn sugar because it dissolves really easily in liquid, and it ferments really cleanly, by which I mean it doesn't leave any real noticeable aftertaste to our palates. And then you add in some commercial yeast. And for these, I kind of switched it up. Champagne yeast is the one that I use most frequently with the kombuchas.
Mm-hmm.
And you can get those at any homebrew store. You can get it online. You can get it from Amazon if that's where you want to go. It's pretty cheap and easy and reliable. And it's a dry yeast. You can get either dry or liquid yeast if you go to a home brewing store, but I usually use dry yeast, which means you can toss it in the freezer and it lasts forever. So you can kind of make a batch of hard kombucha or hard anything whenever you want.
Oh, that's great. Did you experiment with other types of yeast or just the champagne yeast? How did those experiments fare?
Yeah, I mostly use champagne yeast for this most recent book, just because, again, similar to why I use corn sugar, champagne yeast ferments pretty fast, pretty cleanly, doesn't leave a whole lot of its own flavor. And so you're just left with the kind of pure flavor of whatever fruit you're using, or whatever, like the kombucha medium or anything like that. But there is at least one recipe in this book. It's a cider recipe for like a Saison style cider. If you're into beer, a Saison is kind of it's a Belgian style of beer. And this just has those flavors. It's like a lemony flavor, coriander, some just kind of like spices in there. Anyway, for that one, I use a Belgian yeast for that. And then in the other books that I've written, I experimented with all of them. Champagne yeast is kind of my go-to. Red wine yeast is actually pretty good. Red wine yeast brings out the fruity flavor in whatever you're brewing. So yeah.
So if people wanted to switch it up, they could just,
totally.
You don't have to change the recipe. You just would change the type of yeast.
Exactly. And in fact, when I was writing the cider book, the book I wrote before this one, I did an experiment at the very beginning where I had like 4 or 5 batches of cider that were the exact same. I just bought some like Trader Joe's apple juice and fermented that. And I used just different yeast in each one. And it was kind of remarkable how different they tasted. I mean, they all tasted like hard cider and apple juice. But like I said, the red wine yeast brought out more fruity flavors. The champagne yeast just had a very like kind of neutral flavor. The white wine was also good, brought out fruity flavors, but in a different way than the white wine yeast. And then using beer yeast adds a little bit of that character of whatever the type of beer is, like whether it's a Belgian beer or a Pilsner or whatever it is that you're, whatever type of yeast you're using.
So which of these recipes is your little favorite? Like the one, if you had to pick one, which I know is hard because there's so many good ones.
Well, cider tends to be my go-to these days. Like that's like, you know, after I'm done with the day and I just want to sit down on the couch and chill out for a little bit, like I'll grab a cider. In terms of the recipes themselves, there's a Tepache kombucha recipe that's in this most recent book that is really, really fun and really good. And then there's a blueberry cider that is also, if you're not like, if you've tried cider and either they're too sweet or too tart for your palate, the blueberry is like right in the middle. It's like the Goldilocks of all the cider recipes. Yeah.
And blueberry is so good. Yeah, I really enjoyed having cider when I was in France. They have a lot of tradition in making ciders.
Oh, yeah.
But you can get so many different kinds. It can be very dry. They can be, like you're saying, more sweet or tart. I tend to like a little less dry, a little more. Because I feel like it's so raspy on the tongue.
It can get that way. Mm-hmm. Yes. Especially the very traditional ciders like you were probably having in France. Like those are hardcore. Like those are like, you've grown your own apple orchard and you're combining 3 different apples together. And like my recipes tend to be a little simpler, I would say.
Well, and hard cider was the drink of the colonies here in the United States, right? Because we have Johnny Appleseed, the legends of our country being seeded with apples, but they were such an important crop because you could have obviously the apples to eat themselves. You had juice at the beginning of the week, and by the end of the week, you had cider, which inherently meant alcoholic.
Yes.
Of course, we shifted that meaning today, where you know it could be hard cider or not hard cider.
Yeah.
Well, and so what are some of the little rituals that you have around fermentation? What sort of goes into your process?
Oh my gosh, rituals around the process. Well, I have a particular spot in my kitchen where I brew, so that's probably the first thing. It's not where it's where like everything sits while it's fermenting. And so you like walk by and you can like smell all the fermentation. When I was doing this book, I would have like up to 6 little 1-gallon fermenters all just like lined up and crowding the counter space. And you'd walk by and it was like, ooh, you just get kind of a contact high just walking by. But that's where they live. They're like in a little shaded spot, but they're accessible so that I can like peek in and see what's happening. But yeah, usually I set aside some time to do it. I put on some good music, something to kind of just set the vibe. And this isn't maybe so much a ritual, but I get really inspired by whatever I'm seeing like at the farmer's market or that's in my garden, or like just the other day I was out for dinner at this new restaurant in Sunnyvale, and they had this mocktail on the menu that was like passion fruit with grapefruit. And that's a combination I never would have thought to put together, like ever. But it was so good. It was called the sweet tart, and it really was sweet tart. And so now, like for the past week, I've just been obsessed with, okay, how do I ferment this? How do I am I going to do it as like hard kombucha? Do I want to try it as a cider? Should I try it as a seltzer first? Should I do all 3? Like I get really excited about stuff like that.
That does sound like fun. Being inspired by your farmer's market. Well, and so what is it you like about these hard fermented beverages? Obviously, anyone could go out and buy, a 6-pack of cider or even hard kombucha or seltzer. How do you feel that making it yourself differs from just buying a commercial product?
Well, I am equal opportunity when it comes to this kind of stuff. So I both brew my own and I certainly buy it at the store. So I'll try anything. I'll drink anything. I'm happy to just taste all the things. Making it yourself though, I just find the process so satisfying and so interesting. Like I definitely am the type of person, like, I'm not really a scientist, but I get really geeky about that kind of stuff. And so just like seeing how the yeast are working, seeing the little bubbles like filtering up, kind of caretaking for it. I'm also a caretaker. So just being like, are you happy here? Do you need it a little warmer? Okay, I'll move you a little bit like closer to this area that's warmer. And that I just find it immensely satisfying. And then when you get to the end and you crack open that bottle and you hear that little like psst, like as the carbonation is escaping, like that is so satisfying. And then you take your first sip, and when it's good, even when it's bad, it's still interesting because it still gives you information. But when it's good, you're just like, oh my gosh, like I made this thing, and it is just as good as anything you can buy at the store. I'm going to go share it with my friends. I'm going to like drink it on the couch after work. You know, I just get such a thrill and such a rush out of that. And then there's the aspect too of just, you can play with flavors in a way that you like commercial breweries and fermenters just can't. Like you have access to different flavors, and like this passion fruit grapefruit, like I don't think we will see that on store shelves anytime soon, probably, but I'm going to make it and I will get excited about it. So yeah,
well, that flavor sounds amazing. Are there any like really weird flavors you've ever experimented with? For example, we made a bacon kombucha.
Oh my gosh.
We did mushroom infused kombuchas. So anything kind of a little bit out there that you've played with in terms of flavorings and ingredients?
I'm trying to think what the most out there is. I've never done never anything kind of as out there as a bacon kombucha. Like that maybe takes
made it once, never made it again. I have to say, it was an interesting experiment.
I'm sure. For the book, I did a plum yuzu seltzer. That was really tasty, and very interesting. I also did like a what did I call it? I think I called it a tonic water hard seltzer, but I basically made slightly boozy tonic water, and I used all the herbs that you use. Like you can make tonic water yourself at home, and it's a fun experiment. So that was kind of out there for me, like just like sourcing all the different herbs that you need, because it's one of these recipes that needs like 10 different herbs to come together and make it.
Bark.
Yeah, exactly. Like the bark. Yeah. That was pretty interesting. I don't know. I think I tend to mostly go. Yeah, I tend to mostly just, like I said, I get inspired by things that I'm seeing at the farmer's market or things that I've tasted when I'm out at restaurants and things like that. And I'm just like, I want to make this at home. Like I want to recreate this in some ways. Yeah.
And then tell us what it's like blending craft, science, storytelling in the beverage world.
Oh gosh. I always start with the recipe. And then as I'm making the recipe, often like a story will kind of unfold with it. Sometimes it's the process of making it, like, I'm trying to remember now. Well, like with the hard iced tea in the book, that one puzzled me for a long time. I kept getting these like iced teas that had just kind of like I don't know, they just felt like womp womp. They were like fine, but like they just weren't getting there. And I could not figure it out. Finally figured out that it was because I had in the middle of writing this book, I moved from one house to another house, and the house that we moved into had much harder water, and we hadn't had our, water filter set up yet. And so I was just using tap water, which when I drink it, I didn't really notice anything, but when you brew with it, it's completely different. And that affected, in particular, in this case, it affected how the water was extracting the tannins and just the flavor from the tea. So I switched to using spring water. I bought spring water at the store. And immediately that transformed it. And it was like so much better and was eye-opening. So like that kind of became the story that I told about not only about my process, but just to be like, hey, FYI, it's really important, everyone who wants to make this, that you use not just tap water, like go use reverse osmosis water, use, filtered water, like all that stuff. And sometimes it's like, I get inspired by a vibe. Like I'm like, oh man, this would be so good to take to my 4th of July picnic that my neighbors are throwing. And I really want this like watermelon flavor in there. And that's how the story will evolve. So yeah, I guess it's science first as I'm developing the recipe. And then I think about the story and kind of how to communicate it to people.
Well, and water is so important. You're bringing up things that you take for granted.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and even the moving from one house to another, because what I find is when you've been fermenting in a place for a certain amount of time, there's like this little biome that gets created there. And so when you go to ferment again, like even the environment is already impregnated with those microbes. And when you move or go somewhere totally different, people are like, well, I'm doing the same thing. It's the same recipe. How come I'm not getting the same results? And I find so much it has to do with, well, you've lost your biome and now you've got to build it back up.
You just have to like reset it and give it time, give it patience.
Well, and so what are your thoughts on where kombucha's headed in 2025?
Oh, man.
And beyond.
Where do I think it's headed? I would love to see more hard kombucha people out there.
I have one right here. Look, I'll open this up.
Yes.
Mate maker.
I want to know how that.
Let me, this was given to me by a friend, brewed in San Diego, born in Australia. I'm assuming they're using yerba mate in here, hence the name, mate maker.
That's a thing actually that I think maybe we'll see more of, is just like other ingredients, like using mate to make kombucha or as an ingredient in kombucha or flavoring a kombucha. I think I'm hoping to see like just more experimentation with different flavors. Ooh, I love that little like, psst, I love it. So good. Let's taste it. What does it taste like? I'm so curious.
So it's, let's see, they said it's tropical. Pineapple, passion fruit, lime, green tea, and kombucha. Real fruit, real refreshing. I'm at that age where I have to, play the trombone a little bit here. But yeah, 6% ABV. Yeah, how high of an ABV do your products typically get?
Well, that's actually one of the
attention to, or
yeah, I do. And there are ways that you can, as a home brewer, assess the alcohol level of your particular brew that you're making. But one of the cool things about making it yourself is that you can really control how much alcohol is in it. So the kombucha is a little boozier. Like these recipes are all like 7 to 8%. So those are pretty high alcohol. And that's just because you're making that like kombucha base. So there's already like sugar in there. And to make hard kombucha, I usually only let the initial batch of just regular kombucha go for like 5 to 7 days. So it's kind of barely fermented. Yeah. So in any case, at the end of the day, you end up just with a little more alcohol in there because there's just more sugar. But like with the seltzers and the hard ciders, if you use less sugar, it's less boozy. If you use more sugar, it's more boozy. And you can really dial that in however you.
And do you notice a shift in the flavor profile as a result? Like, is less sugar, less boozy, more dry, or would you not? No. Or that just depends on how long you're fermenting with the champagne yeast.
Yeah, exactly. And honestly, when you're making homemade beverages like this, they usually end up pretty dry because as home brewers, we don't have the ability to stop fermentation at a certain point. Like commercially, there are ways that commercial brewers can do that. So they can be like, oh, I want this to be on the sweeter side with like more residual sugars in there. So I'm going to stop the fermentation process exactly when it gets to 5% alcohol or whatever it is. But as home brewers, the yeast is just going to keep eating that sugar until the sugar is gone. So the only way you can really control it is by how much sugar you put in initially. And then you can do some things like if you like artificial sweeteners, you can put artificial sweeteners in there to give it a little more of a sweet flavor, a less dry flavor. My personal preference, if you make a batch that you find is a little too dry for your taste, is to make a simple syrup and just add like a tablespoon or so of simple syrup to your glass and then pour your beverage over it. I just think that
I love simple syrup. It makes everything delicious.
It makes everything delicious and it's so easy. And then if I like it sweet, but my husband doesn't, we can just modify it to our taste.
Yeah, totally. Exactly. Well, and then it's like making cocktails. And then I even sometimes my kombucha gets too sour, right? That happens.
Yeah.
And then I'll just splash it in. It's a great mixer at that point, especially if you have those yummy simple syrups to make your cocktails and mocktails with.
It's funny. I experimented a lot with how to make the kombucha less sour because when I first started developing the recipes for this book, like I said, I love punch me in the face with sour and tartness. And so I tend to let my kombucha go for a while. Like I'll like 3 weeks, 4 weeks, even. Like I love the flavor as when you let it ferment for longer.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's what I was doing. And then I was adding more sugar, adding the yeast, letting it go into the next fermentation phase. And the result was like vinegar. Like it was undrinkable. And I was just like, I don't understand this. I don't know what's happening. Like I was reading about it online, all the Reddit forums and all this stuff. And I'm just like, no one else seems to have this problem. Like what's happening? And finally I was like, oh, I think I'm letting that first batch go for too long. I need to actually like have it be the minimum amount of fermentation time as opposed to like the maximum. And that changed it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know in commercial brewing, they'll even shift the pH. They want to work with the yeast in a very specific way. I mean, craft brewing is definitely a craft, and there's a lot of science involved in it, and it can get very intricate as opposed to what we're doing, which is sort of like wild brewing.
Oh yeah. Oh,
we're just trusting the elements and letting it happen that way.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
But I think you're right. I think we'll see more yerba mates. You know, it's been interesting to see the rise of sort of functional beverages, which are a way to attempt to imitate a fermented drink and its benefits by using, you know, I'm going to put L-theanine in, right, which we already have from our tea, or I'm going to put in inulin or chicory root to make it gut healthy. The problem is the acids in those products will break down the inulin, so it just ends up being sugar. Right. So you think you're getting a functional beverage. They're a lot less money to make because fermentation, as we know, takes time. It's harder to do. There's a lot of craft involved. Not every batch is going to turn out perfect. Right. So it's a much harder process. So I think it's really interesting to see the rise of the functional beverage. I also think it's so interesting to see the rise of the non-alcoholic spirits that you still pay the same amount of money as if it were alcohol. But like you were saying, they can take so many ingredients, right? Making your own tonic water at home, compared to just spending what, 99 cents?
Right. Exactly. Yeah. Exactly.
There's a lot that goes into it.
Yeah. I think the functional beverages is really interesting. And I wonder, my guess, would be that we'll see more of that coming into like actual fermented stuff. So like hard kombucha that has mushrooms in it, like the experiment that you tried. And just that have more like, drink this, get a little buzz from drinking this, but also look, health benefits and like other things that you can get at the same time.
Absolutely. It's traditionally not something you're allowed to advertise with alcohol, right? There's all these rules about alcohol and how it can be presented and talked about, but that is one of the things. At least I personally find like having a hard kombucha, and I'll just comment on the flavor now that I've had a few sips. You definitely get the hit of pineapple. I don't know that I tease out the passion fruit or lime, but overall it's really drinkable and quite tasty. But what I find about the hard kombuchas and, or even kombucha cocktails is I get to enjoy my buzz, but then I don't pay the negative price later with the hangover. I was going to say overhang. Geez, I haven't 2 sips. I'm telling you, man, I'm a lightweight these days. But it is 10 in the morning. What am I talking about? I'm not usually enjoying anything hard at this hour. But tell me a little bit about how your experience with drinking these types of beverages. I mean, look, when I was in my 20s, that's the time when you're drinking beyond
it's true.
Capacity. Over time, it feels like that shifts. You just can't really tolerate as much, but it's interesting to note how that changes. How's it showed up for you, Emma?
I do remember that some of the first times that I had hard kombucha, and this was probably pre-pandemic, I think, and I was down in San Diego, and I remember having a couple hard kombuchas and then the next day being like, wow, I'm surprisingly fine. And I surprisingly, I slept okay. And like, I was younger in those days. And so I was a little more capable of weathering a hangover. And but even then I was just surprised. It didn't really affect me as much. These days I have to admit, I don't drink as much. And so I'm a little more aware of my boundaries. But I do find there are a lot of hard kombuchas out there that are pretty boozy, that are 8% alcohol. And the one I like is more 6% alcohol. And that is perfect for me.
Well, what's
like,
your favorite? Just tell us.
It is June Shine. I really like June Shine.
Yeah, well, because they've got that honey kind of profile to it, right? June
Yeah.
is kombucha's raw honey cousin. Did you do any hard June while you were
You know,
experimenting with the book?
I didn't. And now I'm like, why didn't I? That would have been really fun to do. Next book. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and they even have a place you can hang out down here in
I know.
Santa Monica, and I think there's one in New York. So they're really fun. Plus now they have a non-alcoholic line. So I've seen that pop up at my local co-op.
I should check that out. I don't think I've seen that. I'm up in the Bay Area, and I don't think I've seen that yet.
Yeah, it's here in LA. So I mean, LA.
Yeah. Well, next time I'm in LA.
We're the hotspot for kombucha. The most kombucha is made in Southern California, from from LA County or Ventura County on south to San Diego. Like, this is kombucha central.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. It's pretty wild. Well, so what's next? What's next beyond the book? Beyond, like, are you diving into more fermented beverages? I know you're just newly liberated and out in the world, but what's sort of like a dream? What would a dream?
Well, you know, it's interesting. Like, so I've been working full time for more than 15 years. And so this is kind of the first time in my adult life, like since college, basically, that I have the ability to play around and kind of see what happens. And I'm not like constantly like, oh man, when I was working on the beer book in particular, I was working full time, and then I would pause at like 4:00, start a batch of beer, and then beer, like you start it and then it kind of simmers, or it just hangs out for like an hour while the mash is happening. And so then I would go back to my desk, finish up email, come back, like scarf down some food, and then I would finish up the batch of beer by like 9:00 at night. And then I'd get up the next morning and do that all again. Like, it was exhausting. It was wonderful and kind of like a crash course in how to brew beer, but it was very intense. Anyway, this is kind of the first time in my life that I'm like, do I feel like making a batch of whatever today? Okay, maybe I'll do that. Or like, we moved to this new house with the different water, and it has a yard. So the first time in my life, I also have a garden. I planted strawberries this year, so they're just starting to come up now. I'm very hopeful that I'll have enough that I can do something with them, that I can make, like, really, I'd love to make a batch of strawberry wine, but I think that needs like 4 pounds of strawberries. So maybe I'll do like half from my garden and half from the farmer's market. In any case, I'm just really kind of going where the wind takes me. Like, I'm absolutely going to try this passion fruit, grapefruit situation probably next week. I'll probably pick up ingredients this weekend, and then just start it next week. So I'm
But if people want to follow along with your adventures, are you posting these anywhere? These recipes?
Yeah.
Ideas? How do they find you?
Sure. The best place to find me is really Instagram. I'm an Instagram girly. Haven't quite made the leap into TikTok. I passively consume TikTok, but I haven't actually posted much there. Anyway, on Instagram, it's Emma Christiansen. I think if you just search for Emma Christiansen, I'm one of the first accounts that'll pop up. I also have a semi-defunct Instagram account called The Bold Brewer that I've been like trying to should I resurrect that? Should I just stick with my Emma E. Christiansen account? So start with Emma E. Christiansen, and then if I end up resurrecting Bold Brewer, I'll let everyone know.
Okay, great. Well, that's a good place to go to find you.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm excited for more people to be making these products at home, because there is so much creativity behind them. And like you're saying, there's so much joy and pleasure from creating your own experiments. There's an excitement to want to share it with other people.
Absolutely.
And we're so excited. You're sharing a copy of your book, which we're going to do a giveaway. So we'll share more details on how people can sign up for that. But was there anything else, any sips, tips, anything you're currently loving that you want to share with everybody before we go?
I think the only thing I'd really say is, like, if this is at all appealing to you, dear viewer, anyone who is watching or listening to this, you can do it. Like, there's no part of why I got into brewing my own stuff, honestly, is because I wanted there to be a lower barrier to entry. At the time, this was like 15, 16 years ago. It was all these like brew clubs and like no offense to the men in the audience, but it was very testosterone-y. And I was just like, hey, I'm just this like small, young, like at the time I was much younger, small little girl, and I want to brew stuff. And so I really got into 1 gallon batches because 5 gallons was just one, it was too much for me to drink. And it was also, I couldn't lift it myself. And I wanted to be able to do this myself. So I got into these 1 gallon batches. And if you get into 1 gallon batches too, I mean, like I said, I have them on the counter in my kitchen. It makes about like between 10 to 12 bottles per batch. So it's just enough that you can like enjoy it, and then you can go do something else, because I'm always like skipping from one thing to the next. And the equipment is not that big. It's not that much equipment. It's not that expensive. There is definitely a little bit of a startup cost, but I'm still using the same equipment I bought years ago. And so anyway, this is all to say, if you desire this hobby, you can absolutely do it. And it's not that hard. It's not that expensive. You don't need a lot of space. Like, you're good to go.
Yeah, especially because, like you're saying, you just invest a little bit in the equipment up front. That way you can use it for years to come. That cost amortizes over the many years that you're using it, and it's so useful. So this is really inspirational. I love these great recipes. I hope everybody checks out the book, especially if you've been wanting to experiment with different brews or taking your kombucha to another height. If you want to catch the trend, find a fun local brand. I'm a huge fan of buy it, drink it, make it, do all of it, right? Because that's what the whole lifestyle is about, is not just I'm only this, I'm only that. It's really about enjoying every aspect of it, which clearly you do, Emma. That comes through in the book and in your conversation. So thanks so much for being here today. We really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It was delightful talking with you and all of the viewers and listeners at home.